Alex Donovan, a mountaineer whose spirit was as rugged and unyielding as the peaks he adored, began his day with a familiar ritual. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint scent of pine and worn leather that permeated his small, meticulously organized cabin, nestled on the outskirts of Estes Park, Colorado. Maps unfurled across his sturdy oak table, tracing paths only a seasoned adventurer would dare attempt. His calloused fingers glided over the contours of the Rocky Mountains, a landscape he considered both his sanctuary and his greatest challenge. Every piece of gear, from his ice axe to his well-worn boots, was a testament to years of calculated risks and profound respect for nature's raw power. This morning, a solo expedition into the remote, pristine expanse of Glacier Gorge beckoned, a journey Alex had planned for months, with his characteristic precision. Sarah Donovan, Alex's younger sister, found her own morning rhythm across town, though her thoughts often drifted to her brother's latest ascent. Her life, centered around her work as a librarian in the quaint town, was a quiet counterpoint to Alex's boundless wanderlust. Yet their bond was unbreakable, woven from shared childhood memories and an unspoken understanding of Alex's unique calling. She remembered the last time they'd had breakfast together, just days ago, the familiar scent of pancakes filling her sunlit kitchen. He had spoken of the expedition with an almost childlike enthusiasm, despite its inherent dangers. Sarah had offered her usual gentle caution, knowing full well that no words could tether him from the mountains he loved. The final hours before Alex's departure were marked by a sense of calm, almost mundane readiness. His backpack, a familiar silhouette of canvas and rope, stood packed by the door. A quick, confident radio check-in confirmed his location at the trailhead, a standard procedure before he ventured beyond the reach of conventional communication. "All clear, Sarah. See you in a week," his voice crackled, clear and reassuring. Sarah smiled, a quiet peace settling over her. The sun was high, the sky an impossibly clear blue, promising perfect climbing weather. No foreboding clouds, no ominous silence, just the ordinary hum of life before the world would irrevocably shift, leaving behind an echoing void. The morning's serene hum dissolved into a taut silence as Sarah's internal clock chimed past Alex's scheduled check-in time. At first, she dismissed it, perhaps a lost signal in a deep canyon, or simply a delayed climb. But as minutes stretched into an hour, a cold tendril of unease snaked around her heart. The clear blue sky outside her window, once a comforting sight, now mocked her growing anxiety. She tried his satellite phone, her own voice sounding too small against the answering silence. The familiar crackle of the radio, usually a source of reassurance, offered only static. A knot tightened in her stomach, a premonition she desperately tried to push away, but it clung like a shadow, growing darker with each passing, silent moment. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prick at her composure. Sarah's fingers, trembling slightly, redialed Alex's satellite phone, then the emergency services. Her voice, usually calm and steady, wavered as she explained the situation. The dispatcher's professional calm was a stark contrast to Sarah's mounting dread, yet even through the clipped questions, she sensed the underlying gravity of the report. "Just a delay," she whispered to herself, a mantra against the rising tide of fear. But deep down, a more primal understanding had already taken root. This wasn't a delay. This was something far, far worse, an unanswerable void opening in the heart of the mountains. Within hours, the quiet solitude of Glacier Gorge was shattered by the urgent thrum of helicopter blades and the determined voices of search and rescue teams. Sarah stood at the makeshift command center, a sterile tent, buzzing with activity, the air thick with the scent of coffee and desperation. Every grim-faced rescuer, every unfurled map, every barked command amplified her terror. She watched them gear up, their faces etched with professional resolve, knowing they were venturing into the very wilderness that had moments ago swallowed her brother whole. The vast, indifferent peaks loomed in the distance, holding their secrets tight, daring anyone to try and pry them free. The initial days blurred into a grueling cycle of hope and despair. Teams scoured designated grids, their trained eyes searching for any sign. A dropped glove, a footprint, a glint of metal. Sarah clung to every radio update, deciphering the technical jargon for a hint of good news. The weather, initially perfect, turned fickle, unleashing sudden, brutal squalls that lashed the high elevations. The mountain, a character in itself, became an active antagonist, its treacherous terrain and unpredictable conditions mocking the desperate efforts. Each evening, as the teams returned, their faces grim, reporting no trace, Sarah felt another piece of her soul chip away. As the search stretched into its third, then fourth day, the grim reality began to set in. The initial surge of resources dwindled, replaced by the weary resignation of a prolonged, fruitless endeavor. Commanders spoke in hushed tones of diminishing returns and unrecoverable scenarios. Sarah, her voice raw, her eyes burning from unshed tears, pleaded for more time, more resources. She knew the statistics, the unforgiving nature of the Rockies, but she couldn't accept them. Not for Alex, not for the man who had conquered every peak, who respected the mountain like a living entity. The void of his absence grew, vast and cold. The official announcement came on the 6th day, delivered with a somber formality that felt utterly surreal. The search was suspended, Alex Donovan presumed lost to the vast, silent embrace of the mountains. The words hung in the air, heavy and final, crushing Sarah's last flicker of hope. Her world, once vibrant and full of Alex's adventurous spirit, now felt muted, hollow. The silence that followed was not merely the absence of sound, but the echoing void of a life suddenly, inexplicably gone. The mountain had claimed him, leaving behind only questions and an unbearable, enduring uncertainty that would haunt her for years to come. The first year after the search was suspended was a relentless, suffocating blur for Sarah. The silence from the mountains was a physical weight, pressing down on her every waking moment. Sleep offered no escape, only fractured dreams of Alex's confident smile and the echoing static of his final radio call. She refused to accept the official pronouncement, pouring what little savings she had into hiring private investigators, chasing every whisper of a lead, every improbable theory. Each dead end was a fresh stab of pain, yet she couldn't stop. Her small cabin, once a haven of shared memories, now felt like a mausoleum filled with his absence, a constant, aching void where his vibrant presence used to be. As the years bled into one another, the initial searing agony of Alex's disappearance dulled into a persistent, deep ache. Sarah returned to her work at the library, finding a fragile solace in the quiet order of books, a stark contrast to the chaos that had engulfed her life. She tried to navigate the mundane rhythms of daily existence, but every sunset, every crisp mountain breeze, every passing season was a cruel reminder of the life Alex was no longer living. A quiet battle raged within her. The world urged her to move on, to accept, but a fierce loyalty, a desperate hope, clung to the possibility of an answer, however remote. Her search, once external and frantic, morphed into a quiet, internal obsession. Late at night, long after the town had settled into sleep, Sarah would pore over Alex's old mountaineering journals, tracing his meticulous notes, rereading passages that spoke of the mountain's grandeur and its inherent dangers. She studied topographic maps, trying to find a forgotten detail, a missed clue, a hidden truth within the labyrinthine contours of Glacier Gorge. The fear that had initially gripped her had transformed into a relentless, gnawing curiosity, a need to understand, to piece together the final moments of a life that had vanished without a trace, leaving only unanswered questions. The mountains themselves became a complex, almost sentient entity in her mind. Initially, she harbored a bitter resentment, seeing them as the monstrous devourers of her brother. Yet a part of her, the part that understood Alex's profound connection to them, couldn't entirely hate their majestic beauty. She remembered hiking with Alex years ago, the crisp air, the scent of pine, his laughter echoing off the peaks. "They demand respect, Sarah," he'd said, his eyes alight. Now they loomed in the distance, beautiful yet terrifying, a silent monument to her loss, holding their secrets tight, a constant reminder of both his passion and his ultimate fate. Over the 8 years, the world around Sarah slowly, inevitably moved on. Friends and acquaintances, once offering condolences and support, gradually stopped mentioning Alex, their conversations shifting to current events, new lives, and future plans. Sarah understood. Life had to continue. But for her, a part of it remained irrevocably frozen in that moment of disappearance. She felt a profound isolation, a silent chasm between her enduring grief and the practicalities of others' lives. Yet this isolation also forged a quiet strength within her, a stubborn refusal to let Alex's memory fade into the annals of forgotten tragedies, an unwavering vigil against oblivion. Sometimes, in the quiet solitude of her evenings, Sarah would speak to Alex's photograph. "Are you at peace?" she'd whisper, the question hanging heavy in the air. "Did you know what happened?" 8 years had brought a certain resignation, a fragile acceptance that he was gone. But the how and the why remained like jagged shards in her soul. She yearned for closure, for a definitive answer. Yet a part of her dreaded it. What if the truth was more horrifying than the uncertainty? What if finding him meant truly losing him, extinguishing the faint flickering ember of hope that still, against all logic, persisted deep within her? Her ritual became a quiet anchor in the shifting sands of time. Every Sunday morning, she would drive to the trailhead where Alex had last checked in, standing for a few silent moments, gazing up at the impassive peaks. She meticulously maintained his small cabin, dusting his maps, polishing his ice axe, as if keeping his space pristine might somehow keep his memory vibrant, a beacon against the encroaching darkness of forgetfulness. It wasn't about finding him anymore, not in the physical sense. It was about honoring his spirit, a silent promise to never truly let him go, to keep his adventurous soul alive in her own quiet way. 8 years. The weight of that number pressed down on her, a testament to the agonizing passage of time. Life had settled into a muted, predictable rhythm, a carefully constructed facade over a gaping wound. The mountain still loomed, majestic and indifferent, its secrets held fast within its icy embrace. Sarah had learned to live with the unanswered questions, the silent void, believing that this was her permanent reality. The world had forgotten, or at least moved on. Little did she know, far above, in the silent ancient heart of the very peaks that had taken him, a profound shift was occurring, preparing to shatter her carefully built peace. 8 years had carved deep lines into Sarah's soul, but high above, in the silent, ancient heart of the Rockies, time itself was shifting, Dr. Harris Thorne, a glaciologist with a weathered face and eyes accustomed to the stark beauty of ice, led a small research team deep into the rarely explored upper reaches of Glacier Gorge. Their mission was to document accelerated glacial melt, a stark testament to a changing world. The air was thin, biting, carrying the scent of raw ice and damp rock. For weeks their routine had been one of precise measurements and quiet observation. But today, the groaning ice of the receding Thorne Glacier offered a different kind of revelation. A dark, anomalous shape, stubbornly emerging from the crystalline blue, caught Eris's trained eye, an anomaly that defied the natural contours of the ancient ice. With a mixture of scientific curiosity and growing apprehension, Eris and his team carefully approached the anomaly. The ice around it was fractured, almost yielding, hinting at a recent dramatic shift. As they chipped away at the stubborn, ancient ice, a dark, durable fabric slowly revealed itself. It was clearly man-made, not rock or organic debris. The distinct outline of a backpack, remarkably preserved by the frigid embrace of the glacier, began to emerge, its colors muted but recognizable. A climbing carabiner, still clipped to a strap, glinted faintly in the harsh mountain light, a stark, metallic punctuation mark against the natural landscape. A silent, unsettling realization dawned upon the team. This wasn't just equipment. It was someone's, someone who had been lost to the mountain's icy grip for an unfathomable amount of time. The backpack, once fully freed, was heavy, waterlogged, yet astonishingly intact. Harris gently unzipped a side pocket, revealing a small, weather-beaten compass and a faint, almost faded inscription on a worn leather tag. A. Donovan. The name struck a chord, a distant, tragic memory from old mountain rescue reports. The team exchanged grim glances. They understood the gravity of their find. This wasn't just a discovery. It was a ghost from the past, a piece of a long, cold mystery thawing into the present. Using their satellite phone, Harris made the difficult, solemn call to the local sheriff's department, his voice hushed against the vast, indifferent silence of the glacier. The mountains, after 8 long years, were finally starting to yield their secrets, one chilling detail at a time. The phone call shattered Sarah's meticulously constructed quiet. 8 years of muted grief, of living with the gaping void, had taught her to brace for nothing, expect nothing. So when the sheriff's voice, tentative yet urgent, spoke of a discovery in Glacier Gorge, her mind initially rejected it. A backpack, he'd said, with a name, Alex Donovan. The words hit her like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. Disbelief warred with a sudden, dizzying surge of something she hadn't felt in years, a terrifying, almost unbearable hope. It was a hope laced with dread, a premonition that the answer she desperately craved might be more devastating than the uncertainty. The carefully built walls around her heart began to crack, threatening to unleash a torrent of suppressed emotion. With trembling hands, Sarah hung up the phone, her world spinning on an axis of shock and a nascent fragile hope. The quiet order of her library job, her carefully curated routines, all dissolved into insignificance. She had to see it, touch it, know for herself. Every fiber of her being screamed for answers, for closure. Dismissing the sheriff's cautious advice to wait, she grabbed her keys, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The drive to the command center, re-established near the trailhead after all these years, felt surreal, a journey back in time to the darkest days of her life. The mountains loomed, no longer indifferent, but now a vast, silent witness, preparing to speak, to finally relinquish the truth they had guarded for so long. The makeshift tent at the trailhead, a stark echo of the past, was a flurry of hushed activity. Inside, on a sterile examination table, lay the object that had ripped open her carefully sealed wounds, a familiar faded green mountaineering backpack. It was unmistakably Alex's. Sarah knelt, her fingers tracing the worn canvas, the distinctive patched tear near the bottom, a memory of a clumsy fall years ago. Her breath hitched. The very sight of it, tangible proof after so long, unleashed a wave of raw grief and an overwhelming sense of Alex's presence. It was a fragment of him, frozen in time, now returned. The answer still lay hidden within its waterlogged contents, but the backpack itself was a chilling, undeniable testament. Alex had been here. The discovery of Alex's backpack ignited a frantic, renewed investigation, shattering the quiet resignation that had settled over Sarah's life. Sheriff Brody, a man whose face was etched with years of mountain rescues, oversaw the meticulous examination. Every zipper, every seam, every faded mark on the canvas was scrutinized. Sarah watched, her heart a raw knot of conflicting emotions. Hope, sharp and terrifying, warred with a primal dread of what truths the bag might hold. The initial findings were grim. Water damage permeated the contents, yet the extreme cold of the glacier had astonishingly preserved the fabric itself. It was Alex's, undeniably, a tangible ghost from a past Sarah had almost convinced herself was unreachable. The first stage of the search was over. The real, agonizing one had just begun. Carefully, almost reverently, forensic specialists began to extract the backpack's contents. Among the waterlogged climbing ropes, a collapsed tent, and emergency rations, a small leather-bound journal emerged. Its pages, swollen and brittle, were fused together in places, but the distinctive handwriting on the cover was unmistakably Alex's. Sarah gasped, a sob catching in her throat. This was it, the direct link, his voice from the silence. The experts, however, moved with frustrating precision, explaining the need for controlled drying and preservation. Sarah felt an agonizing push-pull, her desperate need to rip it open and read every word, battled with the logical understanding that a single mistake could obliterate the very answers she craved. The weight of 8 years of unanswered questions pressed down on her, magnified by this agonizing proximity to the truth. Over the next agonizing days, the journal underwent a painstaking restoration process. Under controlled conditions, specialists carefully separated and dried each page. The first legible entries, though fragmented, began to surface. Alex's clear, concise notes detailed his initial days on the mountain, the crisp air, the solitude, the breathtaking vistas. He described the familiar peaks with a poet's eye, a profound sense of peace evident in his words. But then a subtle shift in tone appeared. A brief, almost throwaway line about anomalous ice formations and unusual rockfall patterns on a particular ridge hinted at something unexpected, a deviation from his planned route, injecting a fresh wave of mystery and a chilling premonition of danger into the unfolding narrative. However, the path to understanding was far from clear. Many pages remained stubbornly illegible, their ink blurred into abstract patterns by the relentless moisture. Other entries were cryptic, shorthand notes that made sense only to Alex, or perhaps were never fully completed. Sarah's initial surge of hope was now tempered by a gnawing frustration. The mountain, even in its act of revealing, continued to guard its deepest secrets, presenting a puzzle with crucial pieces missing. Each indecipherable word was a fresh stab of pain, a reminder of the vast, unbridgeable chasm between her and the man she desperately sought to understand. The physical obstacles of time and nature continued their silent, relentless assault on her fragile peace. To overcome these obstacles, Sheriff Brody brought in a renowned mountaineering historian, Dr. Evelyn Reed, known for her expertise in deciphering old expedition journals and understanding the unique psychology of high-altitude climbers. Reed immediately recognized Alex's meticulous, almost obsessive, note-taking style. She posited that Alex might have used a personal shorthand or even a rudimentary code for sensitive observations. Her presence introduced a new dynamic, a methodical approach that clashed with Sarah's raw emotional urgency. The pressure mounted not just from the internal clock of Sarah's grief, but from the external world, as media interest, once dormant, began to stir, sensing the gravity of the thawing mystery. Deep within a sealed, waterproof compartment of the backpack, a discovery further intensified the mystery. A meticulously hand-drawn topographic map, heavily annotated by Alex. It wasn't a standard, commercially available map. This one featured an obscure, almost imperceptible route, etched into a particularly treacherous section of the notorious Devil's Thumb Formation, a path known for its extreme technical difficulty and instability. Alex's neat, precise markings indicated a planned traverse, a clear deviation from his publicly stated itinerary. Sarah stared at it, a cold dread creeping in. Alex, always cautious, rarely took unnecessary risks. What compelled him to attempt such a perilous, hidden route? The map was a silent, chilling testament to an ambition she hadn't fully grasped. Concurrent with the map's revelation, a team of meteorologists, re-examining historical weather patterns from 8 years prior, uncovered a critical detail. While the general forecast for Glacier Gorge had been clear, high-resolution satellite imagery revealed a localized microclimate anomaly. A sudden, intense blizzard and unexpected rockfall activity precisely over the Devil's Thumb area on the very day Alex had been scheduled to pass through. This explained why the original search had yielded nothing. The general conditions didn't reflect the specific, brutal reality of his location. The mountain hadn't just claimed him. It had done so with a cruel, targeted precision, a natural trap sprung in an instant, leaving no trace for years. The tension reached a crescendo when Dr. Reed, after days of painstaking work, finally deciphered a series of complex symbols on the final, most damaged page of the journal. Simultaneously, a small, incredibly durable digital camera was recovered from a sealed internal pocket of the backpack, its memory card remarkably intact. The journal entry, though still fragmented, spoke of a sudden shift, unstable ice, and a desperate final warning. The camera, when its files were extracted, contained a single, chillingly clear photo, a vast, impending icefall, captured just moments before impact. The image, combined with the journal's last words, didn't provide every answer, but it painted a harrowing, undeniable picture of Alex's final, tragic moments, pulling Sarah to the precipice of absolute, heartbreaking closure. The screen of the forensic tablet glowed, starkly illuminating Sarah's tear-streaked face as the chilling image from Alex's camera materialized. It wasn't a casual snapshot. It was a final, desperate testament. A colossal wall of ancient, fractured ice loomed against swirling snow, the very impending icefall Dr. Reed had described. Simultaneously, Reed's quiet voice read the last deciphered lines from the journal, Alex's hurried scrawl detailing a sudden shift, unstable ice, no escape, warning. The words, combined with the horrifying visual, stitched fragmented clues into a seamless, brutal narrative. Sarah felt the air leave her lungs, not in a gasp, but in a shuddering release of 8 years of held breath. The truth, raw and unforgiving, had finally surfaced from the glacial depths, bringing an overwhelming wave of grief and an unbearable clarity. The details, though sparse, painted a vivid, agonizing picture. Alex, caught in the localized blizzard, had sought temporary shelter near Devil's Thumb, drawn by the anomalous formations he'd noted. This calculated risk became his undoing. The microclimate anomaly, a sudden, violent rockfall, destabilized the ancient glacier above him. He had seen it coming, the journal's final words, a frantic attempt to record his fate, the camera flash capturing the last terrifying seconds. He hadn't been lost to a simple fall or exposure. He was swallowed whole, instantly, by the mountain's raw, indiscriminate power. His expertise, his respect, his meticulous planning, all rendered futile against an act of nature so sudden, so immense, it left no room for escape, only a final defiant click. A profound silence fell over the command center, broken only by Sarah's ragged breathing. It wasn't the silence of uncertainty anymore, but the heavy quiet of absolute truth. Tears flowed freely, not just from grief, but from a strange, overwhelming sense of release. 8 years of agonizing questions, of chasing phantom hopes, of battling an invisible enemy, had finally culminated in this devastating yet liberating revelation. Alex hadn't simply vanished. He had faced his end with the same courage and keen observation that defined his life, trying to warn, to document, even in his final moments. Sarah closed her eyes, picturing him, not lost in a void, but standing firm, a part of the majestic, terrible beauty that had claimed him. The mountain had given him back not whole, but with the peace of knowledge, allowing her to finally begin the arduous process of healing. The days following the discovery of Alex's final moments were a paradoxical blend of profound grief and an almost unbearable lightness. Sarah no longer felt the suffocating weight of the unknown. The void that had consumed her for 8 years was now filled, albeit with the chilling clarity of his last stand. She mourned him anew, not as a vanished mystery, but as a brave soul who faced his end with characteristic resolve. The image of the impending icefall, the frantic scrawl of his journal, became a haunting, yet oddly comforting, tableau. It was a terrifying truth, but it was the truth, a definitive answer that allowed her to finally exhale. The endless loop of what if quieted, replaced by the somber acceptance of what was. This brutal closure was a wound, yes, but one that could at last begin to heal. In the months that followed, Sarah's life slowly, painstakingly, began to reconfigure itself. The cabin, once a mausoleum of absence, transformed into a sanctuary of memory. She still visited the trailhead, but her gaze at the towering peaks was no longer one of desperate pleading, but of quiet reverence. The mountains remained formidable, but they were no longer the cruel, indifferent antagonists. They were the grand, untamed stage where Alex had lived and died, a testament to his boundless spirit. Sarah found a fragile peace in this understanding. She began volunteering at the local Wilderness Rescue Center, sharing her story, not as a victim, but as a testament to the mountain's power and the human spirit's resilience. Her grief evolved, becoming a quiet strength, a profound empathy for others facing loss. Alex Donovan's story, once a local tragedy, resonated far beyond Estes Park. His journal entries and the final photograph, released with Sarah's permission, became a poignant reminder of nature's raw power and the indomitable human spirit. Sarah found purpose in ensuring his legacy wasn't just about a disappearance, but about a life lived fully, fearlessly, and with profound respect for the wild. She established a foundation in his name dedicated to mountain safety and the preservation of wilderness areas, transforming her pain into a beacon of hope for others. The mountain had claimed Alex, but in its own time it had also returned him, offering not just an end to a mystery, but a new beginning for Sarah, a life forever shaped by loss, yet ultimately defined by love, memory, and an enduring connection to the majestic, silent peaks.